You know, a lot of times people will ask me for advice in a consultation for the landscaping that has been either done or was done in the past. Yesterday I went out to a couple who was very disappointed with the landscape that they had just paid to have installed. It's been in about 6 months now, and they clearly are not happy. So I went and looked at it, and I can completely understand why. It's very important to know what a plant will evolve into, or a tree will evolve into. You can't just throw everything in there and hope it's going to work. You have to really be able to project. And it was very clear to me that whoever they hired didn't have a clue. They really didn't know where to put stuff or how to put stuff. And well, come on and I'll show you. Let's take a trip out to Sunnyvale. You know, from time to time I get called out to talk to a client about their landscape. And in this case, this is a new landscape that the clients did themselves, and they wanted my opinion on it. So I'm here ahead of time, and I'm looking at things and trying to predict what the future will hold. Well, first off, we've got a couple of cutleaf Japanese maples, which are really beautiful plants, but they like kind of a sheltered amount of sun. In full direct sun, they often burn by the end of summer, and it's better to have them back a little bit. So I would have had this one back in here, much closer centered in this area. The camellias, if you want a camellia, could have gone over here, and maybe one in the back corner, and then left room for some other floral plants in the front. What's going to happen now is as this grows wider and wider, and these plants grow up, you're going to have some competition. And the same as this over here. As this one goes wider, it's going to start encroaching upon the walkway. So it'll end up being sheared. Now there's so many other plants in the yard that are potential problems. Now these are Photinius, and years ago that was a very, very popular hedge plant. And if all goes well, this could still be a nice hedge plant, but unfortunately they're a very sensitive plant, and there's a disease that attacks the I think it's verticillium wilt that attacks them. So I don't recommend it too much anymore, but you have to think about how big these plants will get. You know, they're babies right now, so in 5 years' time they'll be up about 6 feet or so. In 10 years' time they'll be 12 or 15 feet, unless they shear them all down and make a hedge out of it, which I'm guessing that's probably what they're planning on doing. Now they put mounds in the yard, and generally when you have a mounded type of a landscape, you're thinking about doing, either rock gardens or something to explain why it's mounded. But when you build a mound in the yard and you put a plant on top of the mound, when you water, the water runs downhill. So they put white rocks around them for some reason. I don't quite understand that. So they've planted 1, 2, 3, 4 olives in the yard. Now olives are okay, but they get quite large, and the individual plantings are kind of odd. So this is a double trunk tree right here, and you can see that as each trunk grows, they're going to start pushing on each other. So that in itself is going to be a problem. These are probably the non-fruit bearing olives. Let's see what we got in here. Yeah, it looks like they might be setting olives. Interesting to see. So to carry on the projections here, we've got, this is a single trunk olive tree with a lot of little stubs down there that should be cleaned up. A loud truck. That's a double trunk olive tree. That's a double trunk olive tree. And you can guess what the future is going to hold. Oh, look at that. We've got olives. So this is not a fruitless olive. This is going to turn into a monster. Maybe they love olives, but these olive trees, a mature olive tree can have a spread of 40 or even 50 feet sometimes. They can become really wide trees. They can be easily as big as that Mayton over there in 10 years time, 15 years time. So what's going to happen? Well, this tree and this tree and this tree will mesh, and you're just going to have this great big blob of foliage out here that's going to be overshadowing all the Photinius. Over here we've got a birch grouping. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 trunks in this grouping, and these are trees. So I'm guessing he picked this because it had a lot of foliage, but you can only imagine what's going to happen as each of these trees grows. Every single one of them is going to start either pushing on each other and causing some problems. This should be an individual planting, not a grouping like that. There's really no way to remedy that. There's another tree over here. This is a flowering cherry, and flowering cherries are typically grafted. And oh yeah, you can see where the graft is. So they've got this long standard here, and it's all grafted up here. And I have to warn him to keep the foliage off the lower part of the stem, because this is coming from the rootstock, and you want to promote the foliage up high. This is not a bad choice over here, and actually if it was a single trunk birch, that would be all right. Now the usage of black dyed mulch, these are wood chips, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to recognize that black mulches, really dark mulches, are hotter. And we are suffering from drought conditions here in California, or we have in the last 10 years. So making the soil heat up even more so just requires more water. So to me, that doesn't make any sense. I can see underneath the mulch that the soil looks pretty sad. And there's just sort of a hodgepodge of plantings going on here. Everything is just sort of put haphazard. You've got, lavender plants here. You've got a flax bush right here, which is going to get huge. There's 2 flax bushes over there. They're going to get huge. They get big and wide. So there really isn't any rhyme or reason for projecting what's going to happen in this landscape. In 10 years' time, this is just going to be one big, massive foliage, and they're going to want to cut everything down and start over. Now, granted, they're on a busy road, but if you absorb your whole front yard and you have to start over in 10 years' time, what are you gaining? So the whole thought process here, now that the Photinius are in, I guess I'd probably leave them. That's not what I would have chose from the first place. But the olive trees, I think that's a mistake. Maybe one olive tree in the middle might have been better. And there's something else in the middle here that has died. Let me see what that is. It's hard to tell. I can't even tell what this is. It looks like a cherry. Oh, it's a graft. Oh, this is a flowering cherry as well. Yeah, but it was grafted down there. Maybe it's a fruit-bearing cherry. I can see some blossoms that withered up and fell apart. So clearly this is not making it. He's going to say, why? Why did that die? Well, here in California we need to do irrigation, and people always put the irrigation right on the trunk. So granted, this area needs to be watered in the early stages, but for the long run, if you're going to do plantings and you use this kind of spaghetti irrigation, put your irrigation out here so it sprays this area, not right on the trunk where it keeps it constantly wet and develops root rot. So what is going to become of this yard? They're going to have to start over. Finally, they put in a Magnolia solangiana. This is a beautiful magnolia tree. It's kind of leaning here. It's not a great specimen. It's freshly planted. This is going to grow up and do a good job of blocking this window here, but it too is going to get much too large, and they're going to have to trim it away from the house eventually. For the first 5, maybe even 10 years, it'll be fine, but beyond that, it'll be, well, let's start over, or butcher it continuously. Yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10 for landscape design, this one's about a 1.